Grace Holloway, the woman every parent in town trusted with their children, seemed ordinary at first glance. A gentle Sunday school teacher with a soft smile and a quiet life. But beneath the calm exterior lay a mind capable of secrets so dark they would shock the entire community. For years, she had been admired, respected, even adored, yet the events that would unfold exposed a hidden world of manipulation, betrayal, and murder. What no one suspected was that the same hands guiding children through Bible lessons were capable of steering a life toward death row, and the truth would emerge in the most chilling way imaginable. For nearly 20 years, Grace Holloway lived a life that appeared simple, quiet, and full of devotion. Every Sunday morning, she arrived early at the small brick church at the edge of town, carrying lesson books and neatly prepared activity sheets for the children. Parents trusted her without hesitation. They saw her as patient, soft-spoken, and deeply committed to her faith. In a town where reputation mattered more than wealth, Grace's name carried a sense of safety and moral certainty. Grace never married and had no children of her own, which many believed allowed her to dedicate her time to the church. She lived alone in a modest white house just a few streets away, keeping her yard clean and her curtains always drawn by evening. Her routine never changed. She shopped at the same grocery store, greeted the same neighbors, and returned home at the same hour each night. To those watching from the outside, her life seemed predictable and harmless. People often described her as invisible in the best way. She avoided gossip, stayed away from town drama, and rarely spoke about herself. When tragedies happened in the community, she was always among the first to volunteer help. She wrote sympathy cards, organized food drives, and prayed with families in moments of grief. This consistent kindness built an image that no one questioned. What the town never noticed was how carefully that image had been constructed over time. Grace understood that trust was earned through repetition and silence. Every smile, every act of service, and every gentle word served a purpose. Beneath her calm exterior was a mind that observed people closely, learning their weaknesses and fears. While the town saw a woman devoted to goodness, they never considered that devotion could be a mask, quietly hiding something far darker than anyone was prepared to imagine. The discovery happened just after sunrise, when the river was low and the fog still clung to the water surface. Two fishermen noticed something unnatural caught between the rocks near the bank. At first, it looked like debris carried downstream by recent rain, but as they moved closer, the shape became unmistakable. The body had been wedged there deliberately, held in place by branches as if someone wanted it hidden, but not buried forever. Police sealed off the area within hours. The victim was identified as a well-known local businessman, respected for his success and generosity. He regularly donated to church programs and community events, earning praise for his public kindness. The shock of his death rippled through the town almost immediately. News traveled fast in a place where nothing truly stayed secret, yet no one could understand who would want him dead. The condition of the body raised troubling questions. There were clear signs of struggle, and the injuries did not match an accidental fall. His wallet was missing, along with his watch, but investigators quickly ruled out a random robbery. The scene felt staged, calculated, and cold. This was not the work of desperation. It was the result of planning. As officers traced the victim's final movements, they learned he had not told anyone where he was going the night before. His car was found parked miles away, wiped clean of fingerprints. Surveillance cameras along the roads showed gaps, as if someone knew exactly where to avoid being seen. Each detail added to the growing sense that the killer understood the town far better than outsiders ever could. While fear settled in, daily life continued in uneasy silence. Church bells still rang, stores still opened, and children still attended Sunday school. Among them was Grace Holloway, standing calmly in her classroom, untouched by suspicion. As the town mourned the loss of a man they admired, the person responsible remained hidden in plain sight. The investigation moved slowly at first, guided by routine and caution. Detectives focused on the victim's professional life, searching for business disputes or financial rivals who might have wanted him silenced. His company records were clean, and his employees described him as fair and generous. Nothing pointed to anger or revenge. As days passed with no arrests, attention turned to his personal finances, where the first cracks began to appear. Bank statements revealed unusual activity. Large withdrawals had been made over several months, each carefully spaced to avoid notice. The amounts were not extravagant on their own, but together they formed a pattern that could not be ignored. The money moved through accounts connected to charitable organizations before disappearing into a private account registered under a different name. At first, investigators believed it was a case of fraud unrelated to the murder. Further examination showed that the charities were all linked to the same church. That connection narrowed the focus dramatically. Records indicated that the victim had increased his donations shortly before his death, far beyond what he had given in previous years. There were also unsigned documents suggesting he had been pressured to continue contributing. The tone of those papers hinted at fear rather than generosity. The private account became the key. Though it was registered under an unfamiliar name, digital traces led back to a single address just a few streets from the church. The account had been accessed from the same location repeatedly, always late at night. Investigators began to suspect that someone close to the victim had used trust as a weapon. As police quietly mapped out relationships within the church, one figure appeared again and again in the background of financial records and volunteer lists. Grace Holloway's name surfaced not as a suspect, but as a constant presence. She had handled paperwork, assisted with donations. As investigators dug deeper, the quiet image surrounding Grace Holloway began to fracture. Old records were pulled from storage, and a version of her life emerged that few people in town had ever seen. Years before she arrived at the church, Grace had lived in several different cities, never staying long. Each move followed financial trouble, unpaid loans, or sudden job losses. The pattern suggested someone running, not searching for a fresh start as she had claimed. Further examination revealed that Grace had once faced severe debt after a failed business venture that no one in town knew about. Creditors had chased her for years, forcing her to rebuild her life carefully and quietly. Teaching Sunday school offered more than spiritual comfort. It gave her access to trust, routine, and people who rarely questioned her intentions. Over time, she learned how easily kindness could lower defenses. The victim had first come to her for guidance during a personal crisis. He was generous by nature and open about his struggles, believing the church was a safe place. Grace slowly positioned herself as someone he could rely on. She helped manage paperwork, encouraged donations, and offered constant reassurance. What began as spiritual support quietly shifted into control. She understood his fears, his habits, and his need to be seen as a good man. When financial pressure returned to her own life, Grace crossed a line she could not uncross. She justified her actions as temporary, convincing herself she would fix everything later. But the theft grew larger, and the lies became harder to maintain. Eventually, the victim noticed discrepancies in his accounts. His growing suspicion threatened the carefully built world Grace depended on. Faced with exposure, Grace did not seek help or confession. Instead, she retreated inward, planning in silence. The calm that others admired masked a growing desperation. The evidence began to surface piece by piece, tightening around Grace Holloway in a way that could not be undone. Investigators returned to the night of the murder and reconstructed every possible movement. Traffic cameras captured a familiar vehicle passing through an intersection near the river, its license plate partially visible. When enhanced, the image matched Grace's car. She had always claimed she stayed home that evening, but the footage told a different story. Phone data added another layer. Her mobile device connected to cell towers near the river during the same window of time when the victim disappeared. Later that night, the signal returned to her neighborhood, following a route that avoided major roads. Forensic analysts noted the precision of the path, suggesting someone who knew the area well and understood how to move unnoticed. Search warrants were executed quietly to avoid public panic. Inside Grace's home, officers found items that connected her to the crime scene. Fibers matching those found on the victim's clothing were traced to a blanket in her trunk. A pair of shoes with mud consistent with the riverbank soil sat cleaned, but not perfectly. Even the smallest details worked against her, forming a silent chain of proof. Financial records sealed her fate further. The private account linked to the stolen money had been accessed from her home computer. Deletion attempts showed panic rather than innocence. Investigators also uncovered handwritten notes that mapped donation schedules and bank transfers, revealing long-term planning rather than a sudden mistake. As the case came together, the story presented itself clearly. This was not an accident or a crime of passion. It was deliberate and controlled. When Grace was finally taken into custody, the town struggled to accept the reality forming before them. The woman who once represented moral certainty now stood at the center of a murder investigation backed by undeniable evidence. The trial drew attention far beyond the small town where the crime had taken place. Reporters filled the courthouse, and cameras followed every movement outside, turning a once private tragedy into a national spectacle. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy and controlled, shaped by the seriousness of the charges and the punishment being sought. From the beginning, it was clear that the case would not be decided by emotion, but by the weight of evidence. Prosecutors laid out a careful timeline, starting with the financial manipulation and ending at the riverbank. They presented records showing how trust had been used as a tool and how planning had stretched across months. Expert witnesses explained the forensic findings in simple terms, linking physical traces directly to Grace's movements. Each detail reinforced the idea that the crime was not impulsive, but calculated. The defense attempted to shift the focus towards psychological strain. They pointed to Grace's isolation, her past financial struggles, and the pressure of maintaining a flawless public image. Medical reports described stress and emotional instability, suggesting that fear had driven her actions rather than cruelty. Still, these arguments struggled to overcome the clear structure of the prosecution's case. As the days passed, the image of Grace as a gentle teacher continued to fade. Court documents exposed the contrast between her public role and her private actions. Jurors were shown how her calm demeanor had allowed her to avoid suspicion for so long. The careful planning, the effort to erase digital trails, and the staged crime scene all pointed toward intent. Public reaction was divided but intense. Some expressed disbelief, while others felt betrayed by someone they had trusted completely. The trial forced the country to confront an uncomfortable truth about appearances and faith. By the time closing arguments ended, the outcome felt unavoidable. The day the verdict was delivered arrived with a quiet heaviness that filled the courtroom long before proceedings began. The evidence had already been examined, the arguments exhausted, and the public opinion largely formed. Grace sat still as the legal process reached its final stage, no longer shielded by routine or belief. The certainty she had once carried through her carefully ordered life was gone, replaced by the slow understanding that control had slipped from her hands completely. As the decision was read, the reality of her future became unavoidable. The punishment was no longer an abstract possibility discussed in legal terms. It became a fixed destination. Every choice she had made, every calculated step taken to protect her secret life, now led to a single outcome. The teachings she once shared about forgiveness and salvation offered no protection here. The law measured actions, not intentions. In that moment, the full weight of her transformation settled in. She was no longer a respected figure or a trusted guide. She was defined by evidence, timelines, and consequences. The image she had spent decades building collapsed into something unrecognizable. The calm expression she maintained for years could not erase the knowledge that she would spend the rest of her life behind bars, waiting for an end she could not delay. Observers noted the stillness that surrounded her as the courtroom emptied. There was no dramatic reaction, no visible collapse. Instead, there was acceptance, shaped by exhaustion rather than peace. Grace finally understood that planning could only go so far, and that deception always demands a price. For the first time, she faced herself without disguise. The future stretched ahead, narrow and unforgiving. Death row was no longer a distant concept reserved for others. It was her reality, sealed by her own decisions, and there was no lesson left to teach that could change it. Grace Holloway's sentence to death row marked the final chapter in a story that had once seemed unimaginable to the town she had once guided. The news spread quickly, shocking neighbors, parishioners, and families who had trusted her without question. The church, once a hub of community life, fell silent. Its doors closed indefinitely, the pews gathering dust as people struggled to reconcile the gentle teacher they knew with the criminal she had become. The contrast between her public persona and her hidden actions left a lingering unease that would never fully fade. Inside prison walls, life was regimented and unyielding. Grace's days became a series of routines meant to strip away freedom and familiarity, replacing them with strict schedules and constant supervision. The same patience she had once cultivated to teach children now became a tool for survival. Every movement was observed, every interaction monitored. The world she had once controlled through charm and careful planning no longer existed, replaced by an environment that demanded accountability at every turn. Despite the confinement, Grace remained a figure of morbid fascination. True crime enthusiasts dissected her case, detailing every financial transaction, every calculated step leading to the river, and the methods she had used to maintain her secret life. Her story became a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of hidden intentions and the consequences of betrayal. People debated how someone capable of kindness could also commit calculated murder, and the lesson lingered far beyond the courtroom. For the town, the emotional toll was profound. Parents questioned the people they trusted with their children, neighbors second-guessed every friendly gesture, and the church's empty halls became a symbol of lost innocence. Grace Holloway's life, once a model of virtue, had transformed into a chilling reminder that evil can hide behind the most familiar faces.